Welcome back, everybody. Hey, this is part two of this distillation process because today is distilling day. And we're walking you through it step by step on how I actually run this thing, and hope you pick up a lot of information on that. If you get an opportunity, please subscribe and don't forget to comment below. Now, on to bigger and better things. You can always call me at the following number. I'll answer the phone if I'm available, and I'm sorry that I can't get to every call, but I try to, and I actually try to call back if I miss a call. But otherwise, if not, well then you can always email me, george.duncan76@gmail.com, and I'll respond to that. We can open up a dialogue, we can answer questions, anything that you'd like. Please check everything I tell you. Everything. And that's my words of wisdom for today, because no one knows it all. But if I tell you something, check it. All right. I'm going to use, I've got a submersible water pump. Remember that one? At the end of the last video, what we did was, and you can catch that right here. What we did was we got it all set up, and I got my water here, ice water. And I'm going to use this submersible water pump. This was rated at, I think, 640 gallon. No, it can't be 640 gallons an hour. It's pretty highly rated, but it'll lift water about 8 feet. And if you're having a problem, if you've got one that's not as large as this, or is not as powerful as this, and these are about 25, 30 bucks. If you've got a smaller one and you're having a problem bringing it out of your cooler up to your still, raise the water. You know, those small pond pumps or aquarium pumps, they will pump water across easily, but a lot of times they have a hard time lifting water from a low elevation to a higher elevation, which would be the input of the still. So if you're having a challenge with your pump, just move your water up. Okay. Here's what I've got. I got this wide shot for you because I want to show you this, and after this we'll kind of zoom in so you can see everything that takes place. But I've got my still. I've got the 5 gallons of the blueberry mead that went off, and we just rescue it. Instead of dumping it out, we're just going to redistill it, repurpose it. It's about a 15% ABV, so we're looking for some really good numbers. Remember that we wrap the outside of our column with a foam insulation tape that I got at my local hardware store. And the reason for that is that your still is very, very sensitive. Now I'm using both columns, both pieces, but I'm not using the reflux hookup. I'm gonna run it as a straight pot still with an extended stack. And the reason I'm doing that is because I got both of them, and I just think it's a little bit more efficient if you got the second one on there. Plus I've got 2 plates equivalent of rolled copper inside the column. So for those of you who say there's got to be copper in the system, there it is. But for us who know that 4-inch roll is the equivalent of a plate, which is a physical thing and a measurement, I've got 2 of them in there. So I can actually say I'm double distilling. All right. I've got my thermocouple is attached to the bung at the very top, so it's measuring the temperature inside the column. I really don't need to know what the temperature is inside the kettle. To me, that's like, here's my analogy. If you're driving a car and you want to go 75 miles an hour, which gauge do you look at? Do you look at the odometer or do you look at the tachometer? Well, of course you look at the odometer. The tachometer will tell you how fast the engine's going, but it won't tell you how fast the car's going. Well, that's the same thing as if you put a thermometer on the kettle itself. It'll tell you what the temperature is in the kettle, but it won't tell you what's going on at the head of your column, which is what you want to know. You want to know how fast you're going, or you want to know what your temperature is at the head, so the vapors. You control the temperature in the kettle in order to achieve the desired temperature here. But knowing this temperature gives you absolutely nothing. I'd submit to you, if it was 189 degrees in the kettle, you can't tell me what the temperature is here. And if I know what the temperature is here, I really don't care what it is right down there. I just know what it is here. That's what I'm interested in. Okay, now I've got that set to my PID, and we're going to fire this up in a minute as we get closer, and we're going to go through this thing step by step. So sit back, grab yourself a drink, and let's get on with business. All right, this is the last wide shot before we zoom in and start following this thing a little bit closer. This is the water cooler that I have, and here's the, I've got the pump laying in there, and I've got the cord out. I'll just plug it in when I'm ready to start using that. Now, I won't turn that water on until I get heated up. There's no sense in circulating that water for no reason, and I'll describe that. So I got water in and water out. It goes right back into the container. And I've got my PID right here ready. I'm ready to fire this up, and I'll just turn the button on, and it'll get cranking, and then we're going to describe every bit of that from here on out with the temperatures. And you'll notice we got a clock up there. It's 11:25. So again, like I always say, I've got all day to do something, and guess how long it's going to take me? Yep, all day, because I move slow, but I just want to make sure I cover everything. So bear with us, and let's get this thing fired up, and we'll start by turning that on. Yep, I've got it set to 110 degrees, and we'll get closer. You can hear it's already starting. That's a 3,500 watt element on 240 volts of electricity. So let's get close and do our thing. Huh. Wow, I didn't know I wanted to get that close, but I wanted you to be able to see this. This is the PID, and I've got it turned on. You'll see that right now it's sensing 74.7 degrees at the head. And that's at the top of the still. And I've got it set for 110. Now, there's a reason why. You can see my outlights on, which means it's working. You can hear it working. It's starting to heat that up. Now, what I'll do is I'll progressively increase the heat or the temperature to try to get my still to balance. That's one of the biggest challenges that I have when people call in about trying to balance. They'll say that their PID is going all over the place. It'll do that for two reasons. One, your PID is just like your cruise control. It's always looking for that sweet spot that you set. What it doesn't have, though, is it doesn't have a cool down portion where if it goes too high, it just shuts off. It allows the heat to drop on its own. So you have to approach that at a much slower, not a much slower rate, but at a much more predictable rate. So I'll set this at 110. When it reaches 110, I'll let it sit there for a minute, and it'll fluctuate back and forth until it balances. What I want is I want the heat entered into the kettle to be sufficient to maintain the temperature at the head. Now you got to think about that because you've got heat rising. So you've got to give it an opportunity to balance it. It only takes a couple minutes. And then what you'll do is you'll see this, there's an AT button. Now this is the MyPin TA4. Now the 8-Bird 106 VH does the same thing. So once you get this set, they both operate almost identical. If you push and hold this AT button, that's called auto tune. Now you'll notice there's a small green light next to AT that comes on. That's the auto tune light. What that is the PID takes the parameters that I set in initially for my proportional, my integral, and my derivative. Now those values are only good for a process that meets those parameters. And that just gets me started. Once you push the AT button, it auto-tunes. So what that means is that as your still balances, it will adjust each one of those to fine-tune your PID so that you'll always be within 0.1, 0.2 degrees of your set value. So it'll bounce around just very, very little. So that's one thing that I just want to make sure everybody understood, because I get this challenge on a regular basis, and it's just, you got to be just a little bit patient and give your PID an opportunity to do the job it's designed to do for you. Okay, here's another one. While it's running, if you just push the set button once, you'll see mine's reading 100. That means it's actually operating at 100% power. And the reason it's operating at 100% is because it knows that the set value is 110, but it also knows that it's only at 75.9 degrees. It's got a ways to go, so it's on full blast. As this temperature gets closer to the 110, this will change. And it will change instantaneously. It'll go 90, 70, 100, 30, 50, 22. It'll bounce all back and forth, and that is the PID providing the appropriate amount of power necessary to maintain that temperature. Now, as it goes through its auto-tune mode, this auto-tune will turn off all by itself. You don't have to do anything else to it. Just leave the light will turn off by itself. It will not interrupt the process. So if I push the set button one more time, I go back to my set value, which is 110 degrees. Now, okay, one more thing about your PID. When it comes and you assemble it, and you can check out these videos, I've got a whole playlist of how to put these together. They're very, very easy, well, relatively easy. We explain every bit and every piece of it. They're really easy to assemble, and they work phenomenal. They'll run you about, all together, probably about 60, maybe 70 bucks. It all depends on which vendor you get your pieces from, and I've got links on those videos to Amazon and everywhere else you can get them from. Now, most of them will come, and believe it or not, the derivative, you got the proportional, integral, and derivative settings, the parameters. The factory set usually comes with derivative turned off. Just follow I got it on the video on how to go back. You just go through the parameters. When you get to the D for derivative, you turn it on. And that way it works as a PID. Otherwise, it only works as a PI. And that's another challenge people may have. If it's not working correctly, you probably you're working on proportional integral. And there's no derivative there, so it doesn't know how to make that final adjustment. You see where I'm getting? That's just the way it is. I'm sorry. Factory sets. All right. Otherwise, we're going to let this thing run, and we've got the clock up. It's 11:35, and I'll make sure that the clock is in the shots from now on. Bear with us, and you'll see how long it takes to get this thing heated up. When it gets to 110, and I start to increase this, warning, once your still reaches 120, it may take 30-40 minutes to get there, but once it gets to 120, it will be what we call lickety split between 120 and 170. So please, once it gets to 120, don't turn away from it. Make sure you're there, because it will shoot up drastically. That last area of that temperature spread is covered pretty quick. So don't even go out and relieve yourself. Wait till you get it set first. Now, we'll be back shortly. I wish I could have caught this just a little bit earlier, but my PID, you'll notice as I described about it fluctuating, it's already tuned in because the auto tune light went off. It was at 87 degrees, probably about 5 minutes ago. And it shot past 110, went up to 135, and then, of course, it shut off. Now I'll show you. See, it's working at, 12% power. Look, off, 0. So it knows where it's at, and see, it's trying to balance itself at 110 degrees. Now I'm going to let that sit there for a little while until it balances out. Now I also get this a lot of times. People say, George, it started producing, yeah, it will. There's some really, really low volatile alcohols and other substances that come off a whole lot earlier. And I collected a few of those, and you'll see it quit doing it now, but it was dripping. I've got probably about 4 or 5 drops inside here. Let me see if I can get them in this spoon and give them a light. See what they produce. The very first time I did this, there wasn't anything. It was just off stuff. Well, I'm not sure you can see that. Yeah, it's burning, and it's, yeah. Yeah, I can see some yellow in that. Yeah, you see that yellow? Okay, that's the beginnings of methanol. Ooh, yeah. Now that brings us to this point. We're going to run this, and you see it's now balanced itself. There, see, it keeps coming on. It's at 109.8, 110, 12. There, see, it's starting to go back down now. Yeah, shut itself off. So I'll give that time to balance. Here's what's important that we need to keep in mind. First of all, methanol, the boiling point for methanol is 145, somewhere around 145 degrees Fahrenheit or 63 degrees Celsius. And that's where your methanol comes off. Now that's if you have any methanol. A lot of times in a sugar wash, there won't even be any perceptible methanol. But again, the convention or the standard is to throw out the first 2.5 ounces just to be safe. So you may not get any methanol at all. If you do, it'll be very, very little. Now, if you're using grains or fruits, especially, you will produce some methanol. So the boiling point for ethanol is 173, or it's about right around 78 degrees Celsius. So that's when we start producing our ethanol. Now that could happen a little bit earlier. It could happen a little bit later. But the point is that it's right at that point where the ethanol vaporizes. It starts to separate from whatever azeotropic blend it's in. Now, what do? We pick somewhere around 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 71 degrees Celsius. Now that's where I want to stop. And here's the reason why. I can't get to 173 without going through 145. Well, I know that 160 is not high enough to produce ethanol, but I know it's over the temperature needed to produce methanol. So in order to be safe, I'll move this and I'll set it for 160. Once I get it balanced and I start to work my way up, I'll set it at 160. I'll let it sit there for 10 minutes. Anything it produces goes away. It's balanced at 160, but it's got to be balanced. I'll just throw all that out. Once that's done, anything else that comes off, I'm dipping right into my hearts. So then I'll start creeping the temperature up again in about probably 5 to 10 degree increments, depending on it. Once it's balanced, it's a whole lot easier. So right now we're 112. See, it's balancing. I still see a drip every now and then drop out. So we'll give that a couple more minutes. You can see the clock, we've been at this for 35 minutes and we're at 110, and that's only because we stopped there. We could be all the way up to 170 by now, because like I told you, once it gets to 120, it's going to take off. So let's see if we can get a reading is 0% power output. That's because the still's reacting to the heat input that it just received. And see, there it goes. Now it's starting to 5%, 14%, 2%. It's trying to maintain that magic 110 degree temperature. So, stay right there. We shall return. You see 12:15. I've got it set now at 160, and it's kind of balanced itself. I want to show you this. This is my methanol test. Now that's burning, and you can see that's almost a clear. See that yellow at the very tip? This yellow tip is because it's interfered with oxygen and stuff. But what we're looking for that to dissipate and go away. And we're going to let this thing run for the next couple of minutes. Remember, we used it was a blueberry mead, so it's going to have some methanol there. So very dangerous stuff. Be careful. Okay, it's been close to 10 minutes, and you can see from under my arm it's producing pretty good. I got it set at 170 right now. Here's our last test. Yep, you can see that. You notice how that's transparent or blue. You get that real tiny light yellow at the tip, that's because it's interfering with the oxygen. But look at that base of that plate, that is beautiful. My friends, that's ethanol. So we're about to hook up our Parrot and continue with the rest of this run. Well, we're back here. It's been just a little over an hour now, and I've worked my way up on it 184, which I kind of knew that's where the sweet spot for my still is. And I'm hovering around a half a degree or less within 184 for my PID. I'm happy. So it's running. I'm producing right now exactly 160 proof. I'm through the first quart. So let's see, we'll find out how long it takes to run this whole thing, and we'll be back with you. I'm just going to let this run for a while until it quits, and then, well, I'll start inching the temperature up as the volume changes in the still. That's as simple as that. Now it's a 10th grade science project. Happy distilling. Well, it's time for a quick update. You can see the time, and I'm right now just approaching a half gallon, maybe right at it, and I'm still at 130 proof. Now you'll notice that I've already turned up my PID. I'm up to 196. I'm going to hover around there for a while, but I've gone incrementally from the 170. I went to 174 actually, then I went to 178, 180, and then I started going up by 2 to 4 degrees each time until now I'm at 196, and it's hovering there within a 0.1 or 0.2 degrees. So we'll give this probably another hour or so, I don't know, but it's running very well. It's running really clean. I can smell it. It's an amazing thing. So we'll check back with you when we get to the end of this run. Well, welcome back to the end of this run. This is just as promised. You know, I told you my targets are 204, which is my limit of my head temperature, and about 100 proof. And I'm right at 100 proof, and I've been at 204 for about the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes. But as you can see from the clock, we've been at this just at 3 hours, maybe just a little bit over 3 hours. So I'm gonna shut it down. I've got just shy of 3/4 of a gallon. And remember, our prediction was 0.8 gallons. I'm close to that, and I told you that was a ballpark data point in the first place. But it gave us an idea of where to make our cuts and how to do that. Now, I could go a little bit longer. Let me shut this down. All I gotta do is turn it off. I could go a little bit further, but the chances of me mixing some tails into that are more likely than not, and I'd rather sacrifice what I think is I'm probably about a pint maybe, or half a pint away from my tails. So in order to prevent that, because once you get them in there, they're not coming out. You've got them, you're stuck with them. You can rerun it now, and that'll separate them, but then you just got to be careful you don't go a little bit too far again. I'd rather have about 3/4 of a gallon of pure, clean, unadulterated spirits than something I got to really mess with. You know what I mean? Now there are, and again, like I said, I stop it at 100 proof. It depends on what I'm running. A sugar wash I'll run down to 90 easily. There's really not a lot of tails, but I'll cut it off at 90. Now there are people that'll run it all the way. Someone called me and told me they ran it down to 20. I'm saying, good on you. I wouldn't, well, you know. All right, so here we go. Now, the cleanup process is going to be relatively, I'm going to show you that. That's quick, because I'm using stainless steel. And I hear a lot of times that, you got to run a vinegar and water through a still before you run it. If it's stainless steel, folks, just wash it out with warm soapy water when you get it. It's ready to go. If it's copper, it's same thing, warm soapy water. But look inside, because the dangers with copper is that, the patina that it develops on the outside, it also develops on the inside, which is a good thing to have because it's a protective coating. And you don't want to take that away. But look on the inside, and in the crevices and the cracks, if there are any, you start to develop this, it's greenish looking growth, you might call it. If it's green or black, especially black, you need to get that out. So scrub that out with a brush. But for the remainder of all you got to do is really wash it out. You don't have to run vinegar and water through it to cure. There's no sense in trying to cure a still. It's not like the Lodgestone frying pans, those cast iron. No, you just use it. Now, cleaning this, all I'm going to do is take it outside, dump it, spray it out, and we're finished. So let me get this all tore apart. I'm just going to spray it out with a garden hose, so I'll have to show you that. Okay, we're all shut down now. I just wanted to show you two things. This is the 4 shots and heads that we removed, remember? And so you'll see there's not very much from this run. It's a lot more than typically from a sugar wash. And here's my finished product. You'll see I've got just about 3/4 of a gallon there. So that's just some good, clean, high proof elixir. Get a chance, subscribe, share us with your friends. That's all we ask from our viewers, is just share us, because we've got a lot to share. So until next time, happy distilling.